The airport buzzed with activity as travelers rushed to their gates, dragging suitcases and checking boarding passes. Among them were two young twin girls, no older than 10, dressed in matching outfits, their hair neatly braided. They held hands tightly, their eyes wide with excitement. This was their first time flying first class. Their father, a tall man with a calm but watchful presence, walked slightly behind them, keeping a protective eye on his daughters. The family had saved up for this trip for months, a special vacation to celebrate the twins' birthday. The girls had never experienced luxury like this before, and their giggles filled the air as they marveled at the spacious first-class lounge. But their joy was short-lived. As they boarded the plane, the flight crew, two attendants in crisp uniforms, eyed the twins with suspicion. One whispered something to the other, and their smiles faded. When the girls took their seats, one attendant approached them with a tight-lipped expression. "Excuse me, but are you sure you're supposed to be here?" the attendant asked, her tone dripping with doubt. The twins looked at each other, confused. Their father, who had been storing their carry-on, turned sharply. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. The attendant hesitated, then forced a polite smile. "First class is a premium section. We just want to make sure there hasn't been a mistake with the seating." The implication was clear, they didn't believe the girls belonged there. The other passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice, others glancing at the scene with curiosity. The father's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. He pulled out their tickets and handed them over. "No mistake. These are our seats." The attendant scanned the tickets, her face unreadable. After a tense pause, she handed them back without another word and walked away, whispering to her colleague. The twins, though young, understood the unspoken message. Their excitement dimmed, replaced by a quiet hurt. Their father squeezed their shoulders. "Don't let anyone make you feel small," he murmured. "You deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." The girls nodded, but the damage was done. The flight, which was supposed to be a dream come true, now carried a shadow. Little did the flight crew know, their dismissive behavior was about to backfire in a way they never expected. As the plane taxied down the runway, the father reached into his bag and pulled out a small badge, tucking it into his pocket. He had remained quiet so far, but his patience had limits. And when the time came, he would make sure his daughters, and everyone on that flight, understood exactly why respect should never be optional. The plane soared through the clouds, but the mood in the first-class cabin remained tense. The twins sat quietly, their earlier excitement replaced by uneasy glances toward the flight attendants. Their father noticed but said nothing, yet. He leaned back in his seat, his expression calm but his mind working. One of the attendants, the same woman who had questioned their seats earlier, walked down the aisle with a tray of drinks. She smiled warmly at the other passengers, offering champagne and orange juice. But when she reached the twins, her smile stiffened. She placed two small plastic cups of water in front of them without a word, then moved on quickly. The girls looked at their cups, then at the glasses of juice and snacks given to the other children in first class. One of them tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why didn't we get the same as them?" she whispered. Before he could answer, a man across the aisle, who had been watching everything, spoke up. "Excuse me," he said to the attendant, his voice polite but firm. "Those girls didn't get the same refreshments as everyone else. Is there a reason?" The attendant froze for a second, then forced a laugh. "Oh, I must have missed them. So many passengers today." She hurried back and placed two juice boxes in front of the twins, but the damage was already done. The other passengers were now watching, some with frowns, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The father finally turned to the attendant, his voice low but carrying a quiet authority. "Is there a problem with my daughters being here?" The attendant's face flushed. "No, of course not. Just a busy flight, sir." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then nodded slowly. Good. Then I expect them to be treated like every other passenger. The message was clear. The attendant swallowed and walked away, her steps quicker than before. A little later, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing slight turbulence ahead. The seatbelt signs flickered on, and the flight crew moved to secure the cabin. One of the twins, feeling nervous, reached for her father's hand. Just then, the same attendant approached again, this time with a tight smile. Sir, for safety reasons, children need to remain seated with their seatbelts fastened properly. She emphasized the last word as if scolding them. The father's patience was thinning. They are fastened properly, he said evenly. The attendant opened her mouth to argue, but another passenger, a woman in her 50s, cut in. Actually, they're doing just fine. Maybe you should focus on your job instead of harassing these children. A murmur of agreement rippled through nearby seats. The attendant's face turned red, and she quickly retreated to the galley. The father gave the woman a grateful nod, then turned to his daughters. You okay? He asked softly. They nodded, but their eyes were still unsure. He squeezed their hands. Just a little longer. As the flight continued, whispers spread among the crew. The attendants huddled near the back, casting glances toward the family. One of them, a younger flight attendant who had stayed silent until now, finally spoke up. This isn't right. Those girls didn't do anything wrong. The lead attendant shot her a sharp look. We're just doing our jobs. The younger one hesitated, then shook her head. No. We're not. Meanwhile, the father reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the badge he had tucked away earlier. He had hoped this trip would just be about family and celebration. But some lessons needed to be taught, even at 30,000 feet in the air. The plane hummed steadily as it cut through the sky, but the atmosphere in first class was anything but smooth. The twins, now curled under the soft airline blankets, tried to focus on their coloring books, but every time a flight attendant passed by, their small hands stilled, waiting to see if another uncomfortable moment was coming. Their father kept a watchful eye, his expression unreadable. He had noticed the whispers between the crew, the way the lead attendant kept throwing sharp glances their way. He knew this wasn't over. Then, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing minor technical checks up here, nothing to worry about, but we'll need the senior flight attendant to come to the cockpit briefly. The lead attendant's face tightened. She shot a look at the younger crew member. Watch the cabin, she muttered before striding toward the front. A few minutes later, the turbulence grew slightly worse. The seatbelt sign dinged again, and the remaining flight attendant moved quickly to check on passengers. When she reached the twins, she paused, then, surprising them, knelt beside their seats. You two okay? She asked softly. I know flying can be scary sometimes. The girls blinked in surprise. This was the first kind tone they'd heard from the crew all flight. Their father studied the young woman carefully. We're okay, one of the twins said quietly. But, why don't the other ladies like us? The attendant's face fell. She hesitated, then sighed. They're having a bad day. And that's not your fault, okay? You deserve to be here just as much as anyone. The father gave a small nod of appreciation, but before he could speak, the lead attendant returned from the cockpit, and froze when she saw her colleague talking to the family. What are you doing? She hissed, pulling the younger attendant aside. My job, the younger one replied firmly. Which doesn't include making children feel unwelcome. The lead attendant's eyes flashed. You don't get to question how I run this cabin. Passengers nearby were openly watching now, some with frowns, others whispering to each other. The tension was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Then, something unexpected happened. An older gentleman in a suit, who had been silent the entire flight, suddenly stood up. Excuse me, he said loudly, addressing the lead attendant. I've been flying this airline for 20 years, and I've never seen such unprofessional behavior." The cabin fell silent. The attendant paled. "Sir, I assure you." "No," the man interrupted. "I don't want assurances. I want to know why these children have been treated differently since the moment they boarded." Other passengers began nodding. A woman near the front added, "It's true. I saw it too." The lead attendant's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. Then, the father finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge, not flashing it dramatically, just placing it on his tray table where the crew could see it. The younger attendant's eyes widened. The lead attendant's face drained of color. Because the badge wasn't just any ID. It marked him as a federal air marshal. And he had witnessed everything. A heavy silence filled the cabin as the lead attendant stared at the badge on the tray table. Her mouth went dry. The younger flight attendant took an involuntary step back, eyes wide. Even the murmuring passengers quieted, sensing something major had just shifted. The father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm, steady tone carried absolute authority as he spoke. "Now," he said, locking eyes with the lead attendant, "would you like to explain to me exactly why my daughters were treated differently from the moment we stepped onto this plane?" The attendant opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. The younger crew member found her voice first. "Sir, I apologize." He held up a hand, stopping her. "Not you. Her." His gaze never left the lead attendant's face. "I want to hear her justification." Passengers leaned forward in their seats. A teenager nearby discreetly pulled out their phone to record, sensing history in the making. The lead attendant swallowed hard. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. I just wanted to ensure all passengers were in their correct seats for safety protocols." A snort came from the older gentleman who had spoken up earlier. "Bull. You singled those girls out the second they boarded." The father tilted his head slightly. "Is that true?" The attendant's breathing grew shallow. She glanced toward the cockpit as if hoping for rescue, but the cockpit door remained firmly closed. Then, one of the twins spoke up in a small voice. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" That innocent question seemed to snap something in the cabin. A woman two rows back stood abruptly. "This is disgraceful. Those children did nothing wrong." Another passenger joined in. "I saw it too." The crew ignored them, then acted like they were the problem. The father gently squeezed his daughter's hand before addressing the crowd. "I appreciate everyone speaking up. But this isn't just about my girls." He turned back to the attendant. "How many others have you treated this way when no one was watching?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine. At that moment, the cockpit door opened. The captain, a broad-shouldered woman with sharp eyes, emerged, immediately sensing the tension. "What's going on here?" The lead attendant looked ready to faint. The younger crew member stepped forward. "Captain, there's been an incident with passenger treatment." The captain's gaze swept the cabin, landing on the federal badge still displayed on the tray table. Her face hardened with understanding. "Marshal," she said with a respectful nod. Then to the lead attendant, "My office. Now." As the humiliated attendant followed the captain toward the cockpit, the remaining flight crew scrambled to restore normalcy, this time offering the twins full snack baskets with nervous smiles. The father finally picked up his badge and tucked it away. The older gentleman across the aisle leaned over. About damn time someone held them accountable. But the father's work wasn't done. He knew this wasn't just about one bad attendant, it was about systems that allowed such behavior to flourish. And at 37,000 feet with 2 hours until landing, he had a unique opportunity to ensure real change happened. The moment the cockpit door closed behind the captain and the lead attendant, the remaining flight crew moved with nervous energy. The younger attendant who had shown kindness earlier immediately knelt beside the twins. "Would you girls like some hot chocolate?" she asked, her voice warm. "We have whipped cream and sprinkles too." The twins looked to their father, who gave a small nod. As they brightened at the treat, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted palpably. Other passengers watched with quiet satisfaction as the crew suddenly became extremely attentive, not just to the family, but to everyone. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Meanwhile, in the cramped cockpit annex, the captain stood with her arms crossed. The lead attendant fidgeted under her gaze. "Start talking," the captain said. "And skip the excuses." The attendant opened and closed her mouth several times before words finally came out. I thought their tickets might have been upgraded by mistake. First-class passengers usually look different." The captain's eyes turned to steel. "Let me get this straight. You harassed a Federal Air Marshal's family because two little black girls didn't fit your idea of first class? It wasn't like that. Then explain how it was." The captain pulled out a tablet. "Because right now, I'm looking at 3 separate passenger complaints from this flight alone. And that's before we even discuss the marshal's report." The attendant's shoulders slumped as the weight of her actions truly sank in. Back in the cabin, the father watched his daughters enjoy their hot chocolates, but his mind was elsewhere. He pulled out his phone and began typing a detailed incident report. Every so often, he'd glance toward the cockpit, his expression unreadable. The older gentleman across the aisle caught his eye. "You know," he said quietly, "I've seen this sort of thing before. They'll apologize, maybe transfer that attendant, and business will go on as usual." The father nodded slowly. "That's why this won't end when we land." Just then, the cockpit door opened. The captain emerged alone, her face professional but her eyes troubled. She approached the father's seat. "Marshal," she said formally, "may I have a word in private?" He rose to follow her to the galley area. Passengers pretended not to stare, but every ear was tuned to catch fragments of the conversation. "I've placed her on immediate administrative leave," the captain said in a low voice. "But I want you to know this isn't standard practice for our airline." The father studied her face. "With respect, Captain, it happens often enough that my daughters recognized they were being treated differently. That doesn't come from one bad apple." The captain didn't flinch. "Then help me fix it. Your official report will carry weight, but if you're willing, I'd like your input on our diversity training program." For the first time since boarding, the father's stern expression softened slightly. "Now that," he said, "is how real change happens." As they returned to their seats, the plane began its initial descent. The twins, their earlier anxiety forgotten, pressed their faces to the window to watch the clouds part beneath them. The younger flight attendant approached hesitantly. "Sir? I wanted to say I'm sorry. For not speaking up sooner." The father regarded her for a long moment. "You did eventually," he acknowledged. "Next time, make it sooner." She nodded vigorously. "There won't be a next time. Not on my watch." As the seatbelt sign dinged on, the father turned to his daughters. "Ready for our vacation?" The twins cheered, their joy restored. But as the plane touched down, the father knew their real journey was just beginning, one that might change how this airline treated all its passengers. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, and as the engines whined to a stop, the cabin buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with landing. Passengers glanced repeatedly at the Federal Air Marshal and his daughters, some with admiration, others with lingering discomfort at what they'd witnessed. The twins, now happily sipping the last of their hot chocolates, swung their legs excitedly. "Daddy, can we get our bags first?" one asked. He smiled. "We'll get them soon, baby." His eyes, however, flicked toward the front of the plane where the lead attendant remained sequestered in the cockpit. The younger flight attendant moved through the cabin with renewed purpose, ensuring every passenger, especially the twins, was treated with equal care. As the seatbelt sign turned off, the captain's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the entire crew, we sincerely apologize for any discomfort during this flight. We take all passenger concerns seriously and welcome feedback." The unspoken message was clear: this wasn't over. The father stood, helping his daughters gather their things. The older gentleman from across the aisle extended a hand. "Name's Robert. Former corporate HR, if you need a witness for any proceedings, here's my card." The father shook his hand firmly. "Appreciate that." When the family stepped into the jet bridge, they were met by two airline supervisors in crisp suits, their expressions tense. "Marshall," the taller one began, "we've been briefed on the situation. Could we speak privately before you continue to baggage claim?" The father glanced at his daughters, then back at the officials. "Anything you need to say can be said in front of my girls." They were the ones affected. The supervisors exchanged looks. The shorter one crouched to the twins' eye level. "We're very sorry for how you were treated today. It wasn't okay, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again." One twin tilted her head. "Are you gonna fire that mean lady?" The supervisor hesitated just a beat too long. The father's voice was calm but carried steel. "That's what we need to discuss. Because if the consequence is just moving her to another flight where she'll do the same thing, then this apology means nothing." They were escorted to a private office near the gates. While the twins colored at a small table with snacks provided by a nervous assistant, the father laid out his terms to the airline representatives. Immediate suspension for the lead attendant pending a full investigation, not just of this incident, but her entire service record. A public statement from the airline acknowledging the discrimination and outlining concrete steps to prevent recurrence. His direct involvement in revising their diversity training program. The taller supervisor paled slightly at the last point. "Sir, with all due respect, our training protocols are developed by corporate." "And how's that working out?" the father interrupted. He pulled out his phone, showing a screenshot of a tweet already going viral from a passenger on their flight. "Witnessed blatant racism toward two black girls in first class today. Crew doubled down until they realized the dad was a federal air marshal. At Global Air, explain this." The supervisors' faces drained of color. By the time the family reached baggage claim, things were moving quickly. The father's phone buzzed incessantly, calls from the airline's corporate office, messages from colleagues at the agency offering support, and even a notification that the story had hit a major news outlet. One of the twins tugged his sleeve as they waited for their luggage. "Daddy, are you in trouble?" He knelt to their level. "No, baby. But sometimes, when people do wrong things, you have to make sure they really fix it, not just say sorry. Like when I broke Ms. Lena's vase and had to help clean it up and make her a new drawing." He smiled. "Exactly like that." As they collected their bags, a familiar voice called out. It was the younger flight attendant from their flight, now off duty and rushing toward them with tears in her eyes. "Wait. Please, I just handed in my resignation." She swallowed hard. "I can't work for a company that lets this happen. But before I go, I wanted to give you this." She pressed a handwritten note into the father's hand and knelt before the twins. "You two are exactly who belongs in first class. Don't ever let anyone make you think different." As she walked away quickly, the father opened the note. It contained 3 things. The lead attendant's full name and employee ID number. A list of dates and flight numbers where she'd witnessed similar behavior. A single sentence: "The system protects people like her." It shouldn't. The father tucked the note into his pocket like evidence. Because it was. The family's vacation had barely begun, but the world was already buzzing about what had happened on Flight 214. By the time they reached their hotel, the father's phone was flooded with notifications, news alerts, messages from colleagues, and a dozen missed calls from the airline's corporate office. He let the twins splash in the pool with a trusted lifeguard watching closely before stepping aside to handle the growing storm. The first call he returned was to his supervisor at the Federal Air Marshal Service. "You're trending on Twitter," his boss said without preamble. "Corporate lawyers are screaming at Justice Department contacts. What do you need?" The father watched his daughters laugh in the water. "A fair investigation. Not just for my girls, but for every passenger that attendant ever targeted." There was a pause on the line. "Done. But you realize this is about to get bigger, right? That flight attendants union rep is already spinning this as a misunderstanding." The father's grip tightened on his phone. "Then let's make sure the truth is louder." Meanwhile, across town, the airline's crisis management team was in chaos. A hastily called press conference backfired when the CEO's vague promise to review policies was drowned out by a reporter shouting, "Will the attendant be fired or just transferred?" The video clip went viral within minutes. In a quiet office 3 floors above the newsroom, the young flight attendant who'd resigned sat across from an investigative journalist, handing over copies of internal memos. "They've had complaints before," she said quietly. "Always handled internally. Which means swept under the rug." The journalist scanned the documents, eyebrows rising. "These show a pattern going back years. Why come forward now?" She thought of the twins' confused faces. Because this time, someone was there to fight back. Back at the hotel, the father was reviewing a draft of the airline's proposed public apology when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Marshall," said a tense male voice, "this is David Cho, VP of Operations at Global Air. We'd like to offer you a consultant position on our diversity task force." "No." A stunned silence. "I beg your pardon?" "I don't want a paycheck to make this go away," the father said calmly. "I want 3 things. 1. Public release of all discrimination complaints against that attendant. 2. Mandatory retraining for every crew member who flew with her. 3. He took a deep breath. A meeting with your board to explain why your internal reviews kept failing." The VP's voice turned icy. "You're overstepping. We're trying to be reasonable." "So am I. Because next call is to the Department of Transportation to request a full audit of your complaint records." The line went dead. That evening, as the twins slept exhausted from swimming, the father scrolled through the news coverage. His heart clenched seeing his daughters' faces, blurred, thankfully, in articles alongside words like discrimination and scandal. Then a new notification popped up, a press release from Global Air. "Effective immediately, all customer service personnel will undergo anti-bias training. A full investigation into Flight 214 incidents is underway. Federal officials will oversee." It wasn't perfect. But it was a start. His phone buzzed again, this time, a text from the young ex-flight attendant. "Check CNN." The breaking news headline made him sit up straight. "Whistleblower reveals pattern of racism at Global Air, they knew for years." The father exhaled slowly. The twins stirred in their sleep, unaware that their bad day on a plane was about to change an entire industry. 6 months later, the twins stood in their Sunday best, gripping their father's hands as they entered a nondescript government building in Washington, D.C. The marble floors echoed under their shiny shoes, and the older one whispered, "Daddy, is this where they make the airplane rules?" He smiled. "Close enough, baby." They were there to testify, not in court, but before a congressional subcommittee on transportation equality. What had started as a single-flight incident had snowballed into nationwide scrutiny of airline discrimination policies. 4 months earlier, the airline's whistleblower scandal had exploded. Internal documents revealed over 200 ignored complaints about the lead attendant, and 3 others like her. GlobalAir's stock plummeted. The CEO resigned to pursue other opportunities. The father spent weeks reviewing training materials with DOT officials. At first, the airline's lawyers resisted every change. Then the first lawsuit hit. A college student who'd been moved to economy class after a flight attendant couldn't verify her first-class ticket. Overnight, passenger dignity became corporate policy. 2 months earlier, the twins' school held an unexpected assembly. Their favorite teacher stood beaming beside a woman in a pilot's uniform, Captain Alvarez, the woman who'd confronted the lead attendant mid-flight. "Class," the teacher said, "Captain Alvarez is here because our school's Kindness Matters program inspired her airline's new youth initiative." The captain winked at the twins. Later, she showed their class how flight crews train with role-playing exercises. "Now we practice treating every passenger right," she said firmly. One twin raised her hand. "Even if they're little?" "Especially if they're little." Present day. In the hearing room, the twins fidgeted as lawmakers debated. Then the chairwoman did something unprecedented. She invited them to the microphone. "Would you like to share what happened on your flight?" The room held its breath. The twins looked at their father, who nodded encouragement. The bolder twin stepped forward. "The airplane ladies were mean because we're brown," she said plainly. "But Daddy says when people are mean, you gotta tell so they learn." Her sister added, "And now they're learning real hard." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Even stern-faced legislators smiled. Aftermath. That evening, as the family walked past the Lincoln Memorial, the father's phone buzzed with a final update. GlobalAir had just announced a first-of-its-kind youth advisory board, with the twins invited as inaugural members. "What's that?" they asked, chasing fireflies. "It means," their father said, swinging them onto his shoulders, "you'll help make sure no other kids feel small on a plane." The twins cheered. Somewhere above them, a jet roared across the twilight sky, carrying new policies, trained crews, and